Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the General Manager of Publix Supermarkets Deerfield Beach Dairy Plant, Mike Melville.
Thank you. Got it.
Presentation and insight into the market. That was really interesting to see. Hopefully you've all been visiting the exhibitors at the ProFood Tech, and I know the Publix team, we're taking full advantage of the opportunity to go out and see the exhibit floor, get into some of the technical sessions, and just the opportunity to network with folks here at the show. One of the themes that has emerged throughout the conference program is the impact of consumer choice on every aspect of food production. As Dominic just told us, the consumer's demand for total transparency about how their food is made has become the new global standard. So whether it's on pack, online, or in the aisles, retailers like Publix are committed to delivering fact-based and actionable information to shoppers. So Publix, along with companies like Hershey's, PeaPod, and Kraft Heinz, we all share the same goal, and that's to have informed, satisfied, and healthy consumers. And that's what today's session is about. So with that, it's my honor to introduce the moderator for this next session. Sean McBride has served as a senior executive at the Grocery Manufacturers Association, the American Beverage Association, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, as well as for numerous national, state, and local political campaigns. A thought leader on food, nutrition, and agricultural issues, Sean's analysis and insights frequently appear in Political and Vox, and his opinion editorials on consumer and public policy trends have been published in Supermarket News and Food Dive. So would you please join me in welcoming the founder and principal of DSM Strategic Communications, Mr. Sean McBride.
We have a rock star panel, and we now are rock stars with our disco setting and our hit music. So thank you, production crew, for making us look good. Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today on this rainy day in Chicago? Wanted to thank PAC Expo, the Dairy Foods Association, and all the partners who helped put this event together. It is the inaugural ProFood Tech event, and they're off to a great start, and I know the event will only grow from here as we go along. There's never really been a better time for the topic that we're talking about today than right now. We've got Smart Label, we've got Nutrition Facts panel, we've got Nutrition Facts, facts up front, regulatory activity on GMO labeling, excuse me, that's underway at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We have consumers who want more transparency and clean label products. So all this activity is sort of colliding right here in real time. And so it's a great subject matter, and we have lots of ground to cover today. So at the heart of all this, you really have the consumer. And all the folks up here who are the real experts are going to talk today about the way consumers are driving marketplace change, the efforts that they're undertaking, and also the data behind what the food companies are doing to make sure that they're keeping up with the consumers and what they want as consumer needs continue to constantly evolve and change. So we look forward to hearing their insights and expertise. So with that, let me do some introduction of the group that we have, our all-star rock panel of folks up here. I guess I've got the clicker. Deborah Arcolio, Director of Product Transparency at the Hershey Company, and expert in smart label and transparency and all things related to labeling and understanding consumer needs and what they need. Thomas Parkinson, founder, vice president, chief technology officer at PeaPod, and you get the award for having the longest title on the panel today.
Been doing it too long.
Exactly. And Jackie Schultz, nutrition lead at the Kraft Heinz Company. Let me go back here real quick. I just wanted to recap what we want to cover in today's session. So we want to get to that overview of the food labeling landscape. What's happening in terms of consumer needs and marketplace initiatives, what's happening in the federal and the regulatory world, what are the latest trends, what's the data saying, where's the marketplace going, and obviously we want to talk a lot about Jackie's area of expertise, one of her areas of expertise in that federal government role about what's happening at FDA and USDA. And then we want to leave plenty of time for discussion both among the panel, but then also from get some audience participation as well. So in thinking about the content and the things that we're talking about today on the panel, I wanted to put together a little video just to sort of kick things off and set the stage for what we're going to be talking about today. Back up here. So I could ask the production company to go ahead and run the video. That would be fantastic. So what's next? It wasn't hard to put together this video, just production-wise it wasn't hard, but the other thing was there was so much material. We spent literally, probably less than 45 minutes going out and pulling all those images you've just seen and all the news clips and all the video that we needed to do that, and that's testimony to everything that's going on in the food labeling world right now. So we just did that to set the stage a little bit, and now I'd love to kick things off and ask Deborah to get us started today.
Thank you very much. If the production company could get the slides up on the monitor, I can't see what the audience is seeing quite yet. I'm going to talk a little bit about transparency at the Hershey Company. I'm not sure what slide you guys are looking at. I might have to get up and take a look. Very good. So this is a bit of a word cloud that gives you just an idea of what's going on in the consumer world. And you've heard a lot about this from the previous speaker. So there's no question about it that consumers have a greater and greater interest in knowing a lot more and more about the food and the beverages that they're consuming with their families. And this is coming from a variety of places. Some of it is allergies, some of it is concerns about food safety, some is trying to follow a special diet, whether that's paleo, gluten-free, vegetarian, vegan, et cetera. Some of it is just an interest in social concerns, animal welfare, labor rights, the sustainability initiatives of the companies themselves. So lots of different pressures going on from consumers to the food industry, no doubt about that. And historically, packaging has been the way that we've communicated with our shoppers and our consumers. But packaging is proving to be really inept at keeping up with this demand for information. First of all, packaging sizes vary quite broadly. And if you can just visually walk up and down the aisle of a supermarket, you know that the packages are all different sizes. And the packaging today, consumers tell us, is already really hard to read. It's 2-point font. If you wear eyeglasses, it's really hard to read. And consumers do find those labels confusing. The good thing they tell us is that it's consistent across products. They really appreciate that. But packaging is clearly an analog solution in a digital world. So Hershey started out in 2013 to take a look at what we could be doing to be more transparent to our consumers. And we first leveraged our website. So we have a whole section on responsible sourcing. There's a glossary of all the different ingredients that we use in our products, the definitions of those ingredients, why they're in the product. And we had some points of view on different hot topics that we knew people wanted to know more about, including GMO ingredients. But we really just figured that this package and this analog solution wasn't going to work long term. So in 2014, I started a project internally to take a look at a mobile solution to deliver transparency information about a product to consumers using their phone. We started with consumer research. We did a lot of prototyping. We did a lot of consumer feedback and testing of multiple prototypes and ended up with something that we then took to our trade association, the Grocery Manufacturers Association. And in partnership with FMI, which represents retailers, and 90 different organizations across food, beverage, personal care, household care, different associations, we worked together for a good 10, 12 months to take that prototype and evolve it into something that we could launch nationally. And in December 2015, Smart Label was born. So this is a mobile-based tool that delivers a full suite of information about a product across 5 tabs in a very consistent landing page design, regardless of what kind of product you're scanning. Obviously, it's different for food versus non-food products, but in food, the tabs are nutrition, ingredients, allergens. Then there's an other information tab that has a number of different sections, including the GMO disclosure. And then the last tab is company/brand, where there's hyperlinks for the brand owner to take you to different parts of their website and share more information. There's lots of different ways to get to a Smart Label landing page. The easiest way is to put a QR code on the package. Lots of folks have asked us why the QR code. It's just the easiest way right now to go directly from a package to a website without an app required in the middle to do the translation of the UPC code. So you can scan the QR code on the packaging. There's also a searchable database that's now live at smartlabel.org, which is GMA's brand site for Smart Label. Consumers can use search engines. If you want to search on Reese's Peanut Butter Cups or Nature's Promise air freshener, you can find the Smart Label landing page that way. And many companies, including ours, are going to be replacing static information about products on websites with links to those Smart Label landing pages, and those same links can be used on e-tailer websites, et cetera. And what's coming next at Hershey, this is relatively hot off the press. About 2 weeks ago, we launched something called Source Map. It's embedded on our corporate website under food philosophy and then sharing what's inside. We're piloting it right now with Hershey's Milk with Almonds and with Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. So if you click on those source map links, you'll see 2 maps of the world. If you click on any one of those nodes on the map, you get information about the ingredient, how it's grown, how it's harvested. There's videos with some of our farmers. There's photographs of farmers, and there's information, especially in Africa, about everything that we're doing around cocoa sustainability, helping farmers with their economic livelihood, educating them about not using child labor, for example. So there's a whole story to be told about each of these products and each of the ingredients, and we're hoping to see what consumers think of that so we can expand it. And I will turn it over to Thomas.
Oh, great. Just clicking the center one.
That red. Sorry, the green arrow in the middle there.
Right, perfect.
The big one.
Thank you. So Deb just talked about the Smart Label, and that's, I'm a big believer in that. And PeaPod is a company that is a division of Ahold Delhaize, and so Ahold has its own brands, and so we're both a retailer and a manufacturer. So I'll touch upon what is Ahold doing also with the Smart Label. But what I thought would be interesting for today is, we're an online grocer, and we actually collect the data on how the consumer is actually shopping. So in this case, for instance, if the consumer is shopping for cereal, you can see in the upper right there that they can choose to sort or filter by certain data. So if they say they want to sort, they can sort by dairy-free, egg-free, gluten-free, kosher, these kinds of values. And if they, that's filtering. And if they want to sort, they can sort by any kinds of these values. So we're actually capturing real time what are the consumers really, really interested in when it comes to packaged data. So I thought maybe I'd just give you kind of a quick listing of exactly what it is that they're doing right now. So on the sorting, they're sorting on what's the most popular, give it to me alphabetically, and then they're right to how much does it cost? Get me to unit price. So, there's a lot of talk about nutrition, but they still care about the price. And price, specials, and then they're sorting on calories, sodium. We have a sorting of Weight Watchers, so we use the Weight Watchers formula, and we rate the products by that. Carbs, sugar, and down to cholesterol. And I think the filtering, though, to me is the more interesting part, because that's when they're saying, take this shelf screen and filter down to the exact things that I'm interested in. And so if they search on, say, peanut butter or the cereal, they're interested in what's on sale and a particular brand. But then they're what's organic. So organics, and for PeaPod, that's our fastest growing category for our customer base. Gluten-free, low-calorie, and then new arrivals, like give me some ideas. And, you know, I don't need to go through every single one of these, but that just gives you an idea. This is what this is top of mind for the consumer right now. This is like a week-old data. So, and I look at this every day. I get a report and this is part of that report that I get. And we just hired a new SVP of merchandising. He saw this and went, oh my God, you know, this tells me exactly what the customers are looking for. And then if a customer goes to PeaPod's item detail, we have the smart label. So Ahol's been working, I was on the same committee as Deborah. So we, for all the Nature's Promise products, have a smart label that's generated by the same company that generates all our images and data called Item Master. They generate the smart label automatically for us. So we have a link there. So we have our item detail, but there's more information in the smart label. So if a customer wants to drill in, they can. And they messed the slides up, but there was a picture. Actually, if I kind of go back, just real quick.
That was one of mine.
Yeah, I know. Just really quick, get back to that. So this is Ahol's smart label for their Nature's Promise products. So, you know, really, we are trying to create as many places for the customer to find out what's inside the product. And when they're shopping for a product, that's a good time to show the smart label. So that's why we've done that. All right, I got to get you back to where you were.
That's
Is that
not
you?
mine. No.
That was one of mine. Yeah, that's just saying that there's research that was
It
done
might be
last year that indicates people believe, 57% of people believe that a large food company puts their interests ahead of consumers. But they only believe that's true for about 30% of small food companies. And that's true for large ag as well. So it's just there's a trust issue as well as this demand for information that we think transparency can solve.
Probably a good segue, actually, into my section, which is regarding some more issues building on what Deb and Thomas have shared. One of the key things that we're aiming to do at Kraft Heinz, and I think not unlike our peers in the food industry today, be they large or small, is to really make sure that we're getting information to the consumers that they're asking for, that they need, and in the formats that they want them in. So where it all begins is for us, and likely, again, most of our peers in the industry, is with our product information. We have a lot of data that is incredibly massive, especially as we've grown. It has to be consolidated. It has to then be verified. A lot of that takes a lot of partnering with our suppliers, our ingredient suppliers, to ensure that we're getting the right information and then providing it to the consumers in a manner that's meaningful and appropriate. So we then basically take our data, we provide it in numerous places, one being obviously our own websites, but also then our customer and partner websites as one means of getting that information to consumers. Oops, I'm pressing the wrong button. Okay, and then another one that launched September of last year, the USDA expanded their nutrition database, their national nutrition database, to include branded food products. They added about 6,000 products. I think over time they're looking to expand that much more broadly, and we contributed to that as well to ensure that branded food products that are contained within that database are providing accurate information. And that is a resource that a lot of folks use. It actually is used by a lot of the apps out there that consumers are relying on to find out about the nutrition in the products that they are looking at. And then lastly, as Sean mentioned earlier, front of pack labeling is something that as Kraft Heinz, we do participate in the Facts Up Front program. It's something that we ultimately are working to expand across our portfolio this year to ensure that we're providing nutrition to our consumers in a place that is easy for them to find, that just basically provides factual information without any claims associated. It's been proven to be something that consumers really like to see, want to see, and find to be very useful. Obviously, from a regulatory standpoint, there's a lot of regulations coming about that will really influence the conversations around nutrition. Undeniably, the nutrition label reform that's coming about from FDA and USDA, the format changes are going to make things more prominent on our food products that will then allow consumers to understand more about the products that they're purchasing or considering to purchase. And you're going to see calories getting larger, a more prominent serving size. You're also going to see some changes to formats like dual column labeling for products that have 2 to 3 servings, because arguably someone may eat that entire box, right? So new information also being added, like added sugars, and that will obviously bring that more to the forefront so that consumers can see how much sugar is being added to the product they're purchasing, and nutrients that are the nutrients of concern consistent with the dietary guidelines, such as vitamin D and potassium, will become mandatory. Also, values for vitamins and minerals will be the absolute values, not just the percentages. And then another regulation that you may have heard about is the federal regulation to require food disclosures regarding genetic engineering. And that is something that is going to be, it was signed into law last year, and a standard as to how that is defined has to be established by January of 2018 by that law. So that's ultimately where some of the disclosure options that Deb just mentioned, for example, Smart Label and others, may be an option to make sure that consumers have that information readily available in terms of the presence of genetic engineering, but likely opens the door to even further points of discussion, sourcing, the way food has been procured and processed. As Deb showed you, there's a lot of other fields within Smart Label where you can talk even more about the product. And consumers want this information, right? They want to see more information on the labels. This is from the IFIC Food and Health Survey that was published last year, showing that consumers want to see things like GMO labeling. They want to have better, more accurate labels, where things are processed, country of origin, all rise to the top. And 1 in 6 consumers did respond yes in terms of wanting that information. But as Deb also mentioned, the label's really constrained in terms of space. So ingredient information does need to likely come about in other ways, whether it be it online or through other opportunities with technology. That's probably how most consumers talk to each other. I know my own kids would rather probably text me than speak to me. So they will look to technology to find the answers. They won't ask someone, they'll Google it. So if they can find a way to use their smartphones, to use whatever means they have to identify that information, it will be helpful for them to feel that trust that, again, has been highlighted as the primary issue within large food companies, but within the food industry overall. So information that we provide on ingredients, on the way something was produced, on special diets, really needs to be accurate, hence the internal work that we need to do as a company to ensure that we are getting all of that information together from that first slide I showed you, making it easy to access, so giving those online options in a variety of places, so whether it's our own websites, whether it's Smart Label, et cetera, and making it easy to understand. So not in scientific language, but explaining it to consumers. And online opportunities give us more ability to do that. There's also an effort through regulation and labeling to drive nutrition education. I just wanted to highlight briefly, warning symbols have been mandated in places like Chile, where they are highlighting products that are over a certain threshold for sodium, calories, and sugar, and saturated fat. And that is really an intent to not probably by request from the consumer in this case, but from a public health perspective to really drive behavior change through education on pack. And New York City has also established a requirement for restaurants to carry a warning label for sodium when something exceeds 2,300 milligrams. Canada has also proposed a system that is still in consultation phase, where they have proposed similar warning labels based on the content of certain nutrients. And then, as I mentioned already, our own nutrition labels will likely be and have been developed partially because of public health concerns and dietary guidance to highlight certain nutrients such as calories, such as added sugars that are of concern for public health. And nutrition labels are also being proposed in Canada that do similar things. So my last slide is really just to echo what Thomas was saying, is that, you know, consumer insights are something that we're also really looking at. Obviously, the regulations are one thing, but our consumers are also driving a lot of these changes. And they, as we all likely know, and as many of you are probably doing, are personalizing their own nutrition with this information. In the past, we may have been cautious about sharing these things because we weren't sure if it would impact how they felt about the product. But at the end of the day, what we've seen, for example, with genetic engineering information is that they just want to know the information. It may or may not ultimately factor into them deciding not to purchase something, but as long as they feel a trust with that company that they're willing to share that information, there is an acceptance of that. So it may not be a barrier, as we may have been fearful of in the past, but ultimately it's really a necessity. There really is not, it's not optional any longer to not be transparent as a company, because your consumers are going to want that almost as an ante to even be considered. So technology is allowing us to do that. It's also bringing nutrition and wellness to the forefront. Google Search Analytics, they published a report last year showing that there's more searches for even foods, functional foods like turmeric, kefir, and jackfruit. Nutrition app popularity is growing, as I mentioned, and wearable technology, of course, as we all are using, is very popular as well. So we are wanting to make sure that we're providing consumers with that information in a timely and accurate manner, and I think we are all looking forward to what the future holds.
Okay. Well done, everybody. So we're going to have a little bit of discussion. I'm going to ask some questions of the panelists, and then we want to get questions from the audience as well. Let's start out with a little bit of the sort of the democratization, if you will, that Smart Label and some of these other programs provide. And what I mean by that is, you know, you have the store brands, you have the national brands and the producers of those products, and you have the consumer. And for the longest time ever, we've had the translators and interpreters in the middle, currently represented with NGO groups, blogs, foundations, just that whole segment in between. I was in a session yesterday, and Edelman presented some information from their trust barometer, and I was struck by the fact that for the first time they're seeing a little bit of a downtick in the credibility of NGOs as translators of information to consumers around food and beverage. So just wanted to get everybody's interpretation of how the technology, much like Twitter, has been a game changer. And I don't want to be political, but the president is using Twitter, and whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, it is populist, right, and gives him a pipeline to talk to his supporters. So do we think this might be a wave that the transparency and particularly the digital aspect combined with the on-package is now sort of changing the game a little bit, and maybe how will that impact, in your opinions, the role of those translators and interpreters in the middle? And why don't we just start with, let's start with Jackie and work back this way.
Okay. Yeah, I think so, because I think that anytime someone is speaking for you, they may or may not represent things accurately. I think whenever we can have opportunities to provide information accurately and quickly, it's going to help us to deliver the message the right way and in just a factual way. I do think that those will then be interpreted by folks, you know, in a variety of manners. So the NGOs will still likely take that information and then provide some value-added commentary on it. So, you know, it's all in a variable context, though, as to what the issue is, and every consumer is different. So there's no one-size-fits-all to any situation, so.
And at PeaPod, we're always driven by the consumer. Just everything every decision we make is generally based on the feedback and the data that we gather on the consumer. And so we feel like by making everything transparent, it's actually going to change the industry, change the formulations of products, because, you know, we're putting it out there. And I think one of the challenges we have with Smart Label is that if you're a company that's got a healthy product, Smart Label's fantastic. If you're selling something that maybe not be so healthy, you're going to resist that transparency. So that's, yeah, but at PeaPod, we really feel like even if there's not a smart label, we're going to make that transparent. And so I kind of working at it from both sides and not really paying that much attention to NGOs or just kind of listening to the customer all the time.
Yeah, I think the thing that I think is so important about Smart Label is it's going to take off. It's already growing very rapidly. There are 26 companies, over 6,000 SKUs now in the program, and that's going to balloon over the next 12 to 24 months. And everything that's in there is factual information, and it's always up to date, and it's always accurate because it comes directly from the manufacturer. And the regulators are looking at that as label equivalent. So you can't print anything inside Smart Label that's not 100% accurate. I think what that means for an NGO or any other entity that's a translator of information, they're going to have the same fact base now as consumers. So they're going to have some sort of value add in order to have, share a voice to an audience. And I think they still have a very valuable role. There are consumers that are going to want to know, give me the scoop kind of overall, or, tell me, what the trends are. I was interested that you said you think that a less healthy product perhaps doesn't want to be transparent. We actually view it quite the opposite. Obviously our portfolio, for the most part, are made up of indulgent treats, but they're just that, they're treats. And we don't believe that anybody, buys a candy bar thinking that this is a healthy choice, unless, if your overall definition of well-being is emotional, and, that's fine. But whether something is healthy or not healthy, transparency is an absolute mandate. You need to tell people exactly what's in this product, why the ingredients are there, what all the allergens are, and then let them make the decision whether they're going to buy it, whether they're going to consume it or not. So, regardless of whether you have an all-natural, organic, healthy portfolio of items, or, you've got some things that are a little less healthy, I think all food companies really need to be transparent, full stop.
So let's talk about Washington, D.C. for a few minutes. As you know from the headlines, things are chaotic in Washington, politically speaking, but that has a trickle-down effect. And so in some ways, it's also affecting the regulatory environment in the food industry. With so many things going on with the Nutrition Facts Panel, things going on with the genetically modified GMO labeling, regulations that are supposed to be out in 2018, the FDA is working on voluntary sodium guidelines. A lot of things are in the works. Some of those are legacy programs from the Obama administration. Some of those are things like the dietary guidelines that are, the next cycle is coming up, so that process is getting underway. Would appreciate everybody's thoughts about what the perception is of where we stand with things going on in Washington. We don't have an FDA commissioner currently. We don't have a USDA secretary, which haven't been confirmed. So just a few thoughts, maybe start with Thomas and talk a little bit about how politics, so to speak, are maybe impacting the future of where we go in the regulatory environment with some of these really big initiatives that consumers want to see, that the government wants to see, and that for the most part companies want to see as well.
So I'm not that involved in politics, but I am glad that Michelle Obama can start using PeaPod again. She was one of our best customers here in Chicago.
Did you snap a photo? Do you have it on your website?
No, but they invited our driver to the actual inauguration, so that's how close a relationship she had. I mean, I'd say the one thing where we're seeing government regulation is in two places that we have a focus on. One is there's a sugar tax that's suddenly just happened in certain cities. And so my IT organization is scrambling right now in order to be able to reflect that. And it's supposed to be buried inside the pricing of the product. We're not actually supposed to tell the customer that it's a tax. It's just supposed to raise the price. So, we have a little bit of an issue with that. And then the other thing is there's a demand for SNAP. So that's the food stamps or food assistance. And right now, it's really, really difficult to do it for an online business. So we've got the Ahold government people helping us to change the regulation to make it more electronic, where you can type in your card number and et cetera. So those are kind of two government areas that we're, that are for us.
Really interesting. They won't let you label it a tax.
No.
Interesting. Jackie, how about you?
I would say right now, as you mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainty, but we're ultimately just moving forward as planned with the regulatory initiatives that I mentioned earlier, the nutrition label reform, et cetera, because at this time we don't know anything different. But it is something that we're just waiting to hear if any of those changes in Washington are going to impact. But I think that ultimately nothing will drastically change in terms of the initiatives themselves. Could be a timing thing perhaps, but ultimately the initiatives to update labels, to provide this transparency initiatives, I don't see them being impacted or changed drastically at all.
Deborah?
I would say the big thing for us is just waiting to see what the USDA standard will be around what is and what is not considered a GMO and what has to be labeled and disclosed versus what doesn't. Without that, we're just using the smart label definition, which is fairly vague. I mean, if a product contains GMO ingredients, then you say that inside smart label. If a product does not include GMO ingredients, the company is obligated to state what standard they're using. Whether that's the USDA organic standard, the EU standard. Some companies, I think, are still using the state of Vermont standard that kind of came and went last year. So without a national standard, each company is deciding for themselves what to say includes GMOs and what doesn't. So that doesn't really serve the American consumer well. So we're just anxious for that USDA standard to get done, and it's just got to take some time. In the meantime, we and every other large food company is spending an incredible amount of money to redo every single package in the portfolio to comply with the new nutrition facts panel. So, if the USDA law decides to exclude smart label as a means of complying with the new law, that means industry will have to redo all that packaging yet again, probably in the 2019-2020 timeframe, which would be unfortunate. So we're kind of hoping that's not going to happen.
On the nutrition facts panel, scheduled now to come out in the summer of next year, the Nutrition Labeling and Education Act of the early 90s was landmark, was a game changer. Some people put that forward as really important in helping people achieve a healthy body weight and active lifestyle, and more information is better. And it didn't work out so great for a lot of reasons. We had, in the 80s and 90s, the explosion of the obesity problem in America. People are now talking about the new generation of the facts panel being maybe, if not as game-changing, significantly game-changing, with the changes that have gone on there for calories and added sugar and serving sizes and such. What would it take really to maybe lessons learned from the NLEA in the 90s and apply those lessons learned, I think, to the new facts panel, understanding it's a different world because consumers get their information from a lot of different sources now, digitally and otherwise. But how do we, as an industry, partner with government to make sure that we're giving it a chance to succeed? How do we need education? Do we need a public service or awareness program? I'd appreciate everybody's thoughts on that. Maybe start with Deborah and work down this way.
I think I used to work for the Campbell Soup Company, and the big issue in that portfolio was sodium. And I think, most consumers we found were very confused about how much sodium is okay, how much is sort of borderline too much, and how much is like really bad. So I think consumer education about, what the different thresholds are for different nutritional components on a label is really important. So just having the information is one thing, and then being able to interpret that and understand, what's okay, what's probably pushing the boundary. I think education going along with that label is really important.
And I was really actually pleased to see in Dominic's presentation on the Tesco, taking a lead with reducing the sugar. And that's the same thing that Ahold Delhaize is doing. So I feel like companies, like retailers, need to get into the game here because we can't really wait for the government for everything. So Ahold has actually set thresholds of nutrition that they're expecting formulations to change over a certain amount of time, and also the sourcing. So they expect it to come from responsible sourcing. So they're using their leverage, and I see that Tesco is too, to help change the actual formulation, which then will be reflected on the nutrition panel.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate the question. And as a dietitian, it's a big area of interest of mine is, do these changes ultimately really impact behavior and improve public health? And I think you've both mentioned education. I think that that's key. I think providing the information is one thing, and then helping the consumer understand what to do with that is another. I know to your point about retailers, there's a fair amount of retailers that are hiring supermarket dietitians that are working to make sure that that education is available in store. But I do think that that's just one potential avenue. There's likely a variety, whether it's through the manufacturers themselves, through other public health entities, to ensure that consumers really get that, because there have been already some studies that have looked at this proposed new panel as some potential areas of confusion, right? So with the added sugars, some are actually adding up still the total and the added, and then making that a larger number than it's intended to be. So there's going to need to be guidance to really help consumers make sure they're getting what they need from it.
So we need to push it out there a little bit, help people understand it and how to use it.
Yep.
Okay, let's take some time and see if there's any questions from the audience. We have some microphones around the room. If you would, just let us know who the question is for, or whether you'd like thoughts from the panel. That'd be great. So any questions out there?
There's one back there.
You get your steps in all the way in the back.
National brands, complex supply chains.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Could you tell us the company you represent?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to remain anonymous for
Okay,
now.
fair enough.
And protect the innocent. Not that I'm one of them, but anyway, the complex supply chain would have an impact on ingredient coming into the product. Oftentimes, labels need to be slightly modified. Allergen concerns, GMOs, non-GMOs, depending on which region you're producing in. I don't know if this is a big problem, but I think we need to cover all our bases. When you go to an app-based label presentation, how would I know, where would you get the data to ensure that the label I'm looking at is the right label for my region, or is this not even a concern you're facing?
I can answer that. So if you're referencing a digital label like Smart Label,
Right.
Any variant of a product that's made, so let's say there's a variant made in Mexico and a variant made in the United States. It's the same item, but it's made in two different locations. Each of those packaging materials will have a unique QR code and a unique Smart Label landing page. So the information the consumer is looking at is exactly for that particular product. Likewise, let's say an organization makes an ingredient change. Maybe they take down the amount of high fructose corn syrup and they take up the amount of sugar. That impacts the nutrition information slightly. So they're gonna make those changes to the product. They're gonna create new packaging and flow it through the supply chain. But they're not gonna change the UPC code. Right, so they're really going to have two variants in the market, the old one that might be in somebody's desk drawer for a year, and then the new one that's on the shelf, at Giant or Stop and Shop. So each of those packages has a unique QR code for that variant. So when I scan it and I look at the product and I look at my phone, they match exactly.
And that's true if you scan the product you're holding in your hand. But if I'm doing some shopping on PeaPod or something of that nature, and I want to see a general product X, product fill in the blank, how do I know?
Well, that issue exists today. So anything that you buy on, PeaPod or Amazon.com, Walmart.com, we manufacturers have no idea which product they're going to actually ship to you from which warehouse, which variant. So we give them the Smart Label link for the most recent variant, and then there's a disclosure that says you should always check the package for the most accurate information, because we don't know which variant they're going to ship. And that's today, irrespective of Smart Label.
And you're absolutely right. We have that challenge. Country of origin was one that we had maybe 3-4 years ago we needed to do. And, we don't know where, our sourcing people are getting things from all sorts of different places, especially with produce. So we just put may come from and listed the various different origins, because we don't track it on an actual inbound kind of way. And also, as Deb was saying, we do not reflect the package for that particular product in a particular market. If it's slightly different, or even if it's brand new, we may not have it online completely in sync with what's in inventory, or we might be ahead of what's in inventory. So we might have something that's changed online, but the inventory is still sitting there. It's a real challenge, for sure.
Other questions? Well, one quick question before we wrap up. You talked a little bit about source map in your presentation, and other companies are working on similar things to show their CSR attributes that are beyond nutrition and other things. And the Hershey Company was very magnanimous, I think, in the way you helped develop it, and then worked with GMA and the industry to broaden it. What are the plans as far as you see, as far as source map? Will that probably stay a proprietary program that Hershey Company deals with, or are there plans to work with industry broader to either use that program or coordinate efforts to show other things with child labor and other things that are in the CSR bucket rather than nutrition and health?
So SourceMap's not proprietary. It's a software as a service. It's SourceMap LLC. They're based in New York City. So any other company that wants to use SourceMap to do the same thing can. I don't know that they have too many competitors in that space, but I think this is the next wave of what consumers are going to be looking for. They want to know the backstory of this product, where the ingredients came from, how they were sourced. They want to know about some of the farming methods. If it's a product that has animal ingredients, they're going to want to know how those animals were treated. So I do think this is the next kind of ring out in terms of transparency. We're looking to, frankly, to get consumer feedback on whether this is good, if it's kind of a yawn. We're hoping that people find it interesting. You'll learn a little bit about peanuts and almonds that you might not know. And if we get good feedback, we'll absolutely expand it. But there's really no reason why any food company couldn't do something very similar.
Excellent.
I think what's important is if they're looking for it, they should be able to find it.
Yes.
It's, as I showed in my slides, they're concerned about the price of the product too. But if they want to drill in and find out, that I want it to be there for them.
Great. Maybe one last question we have as the clock in front of us is ticking down. Anybody else have questions in the audience? One right here.
Thank you. Hi, JP Keating, Mosaic Group. We're a pre-press production company, so NLEA is a big piece of our business right now with the changes. We ran into a challenge with some of our smaller customers, and this leads to the metric that you were showing earlier with the faith in smaller manufacturers more so than larger ones. That QR code has been a major sticking point for the small companies because of the licensing fees associated with it, and the indemnification issue now with the legal issues around it.
Yep.
It's more of a retailer question, but anybody can answer it. How do you see enforcing that with all of the brands that are going to be in your portfolio at a retailer? Because it's a significant expense for a number of these companies, and they're resisting as long as they can. It's not such a big issue for the larger brands, the Krafts, Heinz, and Hershey's of the world, but we've been running into it, and people are really resisting it. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, from a retailer's point of view, the one thing I think all of us see is on Amazon, you don't need a QR code, you don't need a UPC code, you just do image recognition. And I'm on a GS1 committee that talks a lot about this, and the question is whether image recognition just becomes so good you don't need anything but just picture the product, right? So in my gut, being a technology person, that's how I do everything on Amazon to reorder. I just show the picture and it finds it. So there's another, also a hidden code that they're working on right now. But once again, I just think image recognition is probably just going to handle it in the end.
Yeah, I think there will be another technology that displaces the QR code. Digital watermarking is one that GMA is following very closely. It's probably not going to be ready from a consumer perspective for a while. And the indemnification issue with QR codes is very real. We're a very conservative company, so we made sure that the vendor we get QR codes from has that license IP so that there's written indemnification for us. I do know that if you're only purchasing a small number of codes, if you've got a small portfolio, maybe 10, 20 SKUs, their pricing is pretty reasonable. So I would hope that wouldn't be a barrier. The flip side of that is a small company can get into the Smart Label program without QR codes on packaging. Many companies are doing a digital-only execution, and they're just featuring those links on their brand site, and of course on smartlabel.org, and they may decide to do something on pack at a later date.
And I think the other wrap on that too is Deborah mentioned earlier that the USDA is required through the GMO labeling regulations they're developing to figure out what they believe is the best technique with on-pack, digital, et cetera. So they've got to investigate what's in the marketplace now with Smart Label or any other programs and decide whether they're going to adopt it as regulation, which eventually that will filter down to small and mid caps. And the resistance that you're seeing, if it goes that way, they may not have a choice, right? The government may compel them to be in a certain type of program, potentially with a QR code. Thanks, everybody. We're 3 minutes over. Sorry to encroach on the rest of your day, but thank you very much for being here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us this morning. Please be sure to take advantage of our educational tracks, regulations and food safety, consumer trends and marketing, food processing and technology, and business and leadership development. These sessions will begin at 9:45 a.m. Please refer to your on-site program for room locations.